Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 5th of March, comes to you from London. And the dollar consolidating a little bit this morning, but still holding its short-term strength. And so dollar strength is returning as the theme to the market. And we're seeing the euro weaker as a result. The interesting thing overnight has been the statement out of China about growth slowing, and it's interesting to see that the markets are pretty much taking this in their stride. We see here the dollar against the yen is holding its strength. Sterling a little bit weaker and back into that short-term bearish mode against the dollar. Against the euro, also just falling away a little bit. And against the Swiss franc, we're also seeing that as well. Bitcoin is up 0.6%, but really still pretty much shot out ever since its big falls last year, so no great incitement there. Looking at the S&P 500 index, we were down 0.4% last night, but not enough to really change the chart here. So we are seeing here that we're still holding on but slowing down. So interesting just seeing the weekly chart there, not quite showing up yet. So just keep an eye out for any reversal. We have had quite a long run since this low point in December, and if we look at the Nasdaq, much the same picture. We're bullish above the cloud and still looking quite strong. The Dow Jones index we see here is higher, and the Russell 2000 index is also pushing higher. So market's still looking pretty strong across the board. If we look at the futures this morning, we're looking at the Nasdaq E-mini up very slightly, and the S&P futures also up, so not a big change there. Footsie is up 0.2% this morning, so the UK market continuing its recovery, but not quite bullish yet on the short-term chart. Mid caps in the UK have fared better. Stronger sterling has been a factor in pushing UK stocks higher, but interestingly, we've seen the mid caps stronger than the blue chips. Looking at the DAX, we see the DAX is also starting to emerge quite clearly into bullish recovery, and the CAC current we're also seeing is looking very strong as well. So we are seeing this recovery across markets. Japan was down about 0.5% last night, but still looking pretty strong on the short-term chart. The Hang Seng was little changed, and China, where we saw this statement coming out, spiked higher, but then we saw the little bit of sell-off towards the end, as showing up in the 60-minute chart. And whilst we don't have any clear upside targets, one thing that is quite clear is that we do have this downside target here being removed from this thrust up. This is going to give us a new recovery level. The key thing is when this ends, pulls back, can we then activate that target? That will be the thing to watch. The Sensex in India was up 0.5%, so that's looking better. We'll look at the individual stocks in a minute. And the Australian market was down 0.3%. Brent crude was down just 0.25% this morning, but still just holding on after a bit of a recovery yesterday. And WTI, much the same picture, of course. US nat gas sitting at $2.87, sitting fairly steady there. Gold is down very slightly this morning. We said yesterday that 1280 was the key level, so that's what we have to watch. If we can form a bottom here and recover, then we will push to activate this target here, but we do have a downside target hanging over us as well. Basically, we have a picture of gold narrowing into a range. A big breakout will occur in either direction, so we need to keep an eye on that. And even the cloud chart here on the weekly chart is not giving us a clear clue as to which direction that's going to be. Silver is looking a little bit more bearish as well. And if we look at US 10-year yields, down 0.8% there, and bond yields in Germany just weaker as well. So we are seeing a little bit of a sell-off there. Just in terms of the bond yield for the US market, we are sitting steady at 2.76%. So still in bullish mode. All of this data coming from Thomson Reuters Icon. If you're a private user, Metastock Zenith, it's the same system and gives you great global coverage across all instruments. So it's from Thomson Reuters. If we look to the individual stocks, for this I'm using Yahoo Finance, just in line with what many of our users are using, and this is data from Yahoo. Sometimes real time, sometimes delayed, depending on which exchange. But looking at the world indices, we saw the US exchanges down last night. We saw Europe was we've got mostly green here today, and Asia we had a mixed picture, some markets down and some markets up. Taking a look at the Dow 30 in the US last night, DuPont was the big performer, up 1.7%. Just starting to see this 30-minute cloud chart, the daily cloud chart just starting to move higher. We saw Intel were up 1.2%. They're looking much, much stronger and looking like a very good recovery. We've got good upside targets here for Intel on the charts. And we see here the relatives. The relatives I've reset to 100 from the start of this year, so we get a reading for outperformance or underperformance so far this year. The worst performer was United Health Group. They were down 4%, and that chart not looking good on the medium term. The long-term trend just starting to come under pressure here, and we do have this downside target. If we move below that low that we saw, we will activate that, so that's quite key. We still had some pretty big fallers too. Walgreens down 2.8%. That chart not looking very nice at all. And McDonald's also down, but the chart looking much, much better. Taking a look at the Nasdaq, just looking at some of the bellwethers here, we've got Amazon were up 1.4%. They're looking more and more like a recovery coming back through the cloud here. We had Alphabet up 0.6%. And if we look at Apple, we had Apple up 0.5%. Their recovery just continuing, not yet through the cloud, and a little bit of a shortage of upside targets. We will get a thrust target off this, of course. The key thing in this recovery generally is we're going to get these recovery thrust targets. If we move back and then move higher, we activate all those thrust targets. That's what we need to be looking for in this recovery. Facebook up 3%, so they had a much better day, and they're starting to look a lot better. Mind you, they had a terrible year last year. We've got an upside target here of 27% for Facebook. And if we can break to new highs above the recent high we've just seen, 43% from here. So that's quite a lot. Taking a look at the Aussie market, overnight, Metcash were up 4.8%, but they are flagging a little bit on that long-term chart. Medium term, they might just be recovering. IRA's group up 3%. They've been quite volatile lately, but looking better on the medium-term recovery. And CYBG also just looking a little bit better. On the downside, we've got Orocoba down 6% and Sierra Resources down 6% as well. So we're seeing some pretty awful-looking charts here. China, we mentioned, was up mostly, so we did have a bit of a mixed picture. We had San Optoelectronics up 6%, and they're starting to look like quite a good recovery coming through the cloud. Still a lot of down targets hanging over. So far this year, we've outperformed the market by 25%. So we're seeing Chinese stocks have really done very well so far this year on the whole. We're seeing here a big recovery in Greenland holdings, for example. On the downside, we had Shandong Gold Mining down 1.5%. Looking at the Nifty 50 in India, we've got Tata Motors up 7%, so that's pretty strong and looking really interesting as well. Indiabul Housing up 6%, although they've really still sitting in the doldrums. And Hindustan Petroleum also looking better, and here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo. Tech Mahindra down 2.5%, so but the chart looking pretty good. Taking a look at Europe, we start by looking at the Footsie 100, and here we see Vodafone. They're up 1.5%. Chart looks terrible though, bearish on the long term and bearish in the medium term. Downside potential of 6%. They're still underperforming the market. Not a good looking stock. Standard Chartered up 1.25%, looking a little bit better for a recovery, but again long term has work to do. Standard Life Aberdeen also has work to do. So we're seeing here that today's leaders are not necessarily the big performers. Rightmove was up strongly yesterday. They're up further today. They're looking much better long and medium term, and we've got good upside targets. So that's one of the better looking stocks. Taking a look at Intertek, down 3% in the UK market. Ashtead Group down 3% as well. Although, interestingly, these laggards are still looking reasonable in terms of their trend position. GVC holdings not looking so good. Pearson actually just holding on to its long-term trend, but medium-term turning down with downside targets. So still not great. Ocado, Marks and Spencer's in the laggards today. Ocado's chart looking pretty good. M&S's chart not looking so good. So, and we've got downside targets. Great thing about this is you can click on pretty well anything you want, and you can get a picture very quickly. Centrica, medium-term, long-term downtrends, and really underperforming the market, down more than 20% versus the Dow so far this year. Taking a look at the Footsie 250, we start just by clicking on the best performers. Ibstock up 3%, so they're looking much better on the medium-term chart. We've got this long-term upside target. Looks like we might be changing trend here, and we've outperformed the market so far by 13%. Here we see the prices live coming in from Yahoo, and we've got Genus Group down 2.9%, so that's quite interesting that they're up, and the chart is still just wavering. Looking on the downside for the Footsie 250, Aston Martin, Lagonda, they of course went public last year and really have just failed to impress, making new lows this morning. That's really quite worrying, and we're just seeing the chart just looking terrible, so not great. Paragon Banking Group down 3%. TI Fluid Systems down 2.3%. Still a lot of bearish looking charts. You have to work quite hard to find the stocks that are going up. Scanning is really the way to do that. Looking at the European market, we've got the Euro Stoxx 50. And we see that Antower InBev in Brussels are up 1.5%. They're looking better on that medium-term chart. Sanofi in Paris not looking so good on the charts, but up this morning by 1%. Unilever up 8%, 0.8%, and again a very mixed picture here. Downside targets, but long-term uptrend. So we are just seeing here underperforming the market so far this year by about 8%. Taking a look on the upside, we've got Kering Group up 1%, Daimler up 0.75%, but again the chart's not looking great. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.